want to welcome everyone back to the archive. I do appreciate everyone tuning in, liking, subscribing. Our next guest is coming to you all the way from Santa Rosa, California. Go ahead, introduce yourself, brother. Oh,
How you doing, brother? My name's Anthony Guajardo. My people are Pyramid Lake Paiute, but I'm kind of on a new journey with that. I want to honor my grandfather, Jim Jensen, who is an Evolve tribal member, and I'm in the beginnings of reaching out to my tribe and find out who my people really were. I've been in Sonoma County for a lot of years, so I've been tapped in with Kashaya and Point Arena, Band of Pomo Indians, and my son is from Kashaya, so that's kind of where my affiliation comes from out here.
thank you for that. So we're going to do things a little bit different. Go ahead and tell us a little bit about your childhood, then your teenage years, and then your young adult years, all the way up to your adult years.
Yeah, so typical journey for a lot of young men in our position. I was born in San Francisco, California. Spent the first 7, 8 years of my life out there, and when my parents separated, I ended up in Modesto, and father ended up in prison for a few years, and that's kind of how we ended up staying in the valley. Moved in with my great grandmother for a couple of years. My parents were very young when they had me. Mom was 14, dad was 16. So, just a couple kids trying to figure it out in this crazy life. And, from Modesto, ended up in Phoenix for a few years, back to California. I've honestly been all over Northern California. I moved almost every year and a half of my life, 14 different schools. And, was always on a journey. And when I turned 19, I ended up out here. And honestly, I love it out here, and I never left. I made this my home, and, to say I'm from Modesto, say I'm from San Francisco, honestly, I've been here the longest than anywhere I've ever lived. And, so I consider Santa Rosa my home. And to go back into the beginning of the childhood, my father was a drug dealer. Both my parents were users. Life was, it was interesting. It wasn't the worst life you could possibly have as a young man, a lot of chaos, a lot of drama, but, you grow with it. And you figure it out. And when you're little, you really don't pay attention to those things. If you're not getting beat all the time, life is just life. I'm not going to act like I had the worst childhood ever, man. I watched my dad put hands on my mom a lot. So that's a big part of why I don't conduct myself like that with women. So, yeah, growing up in the Bay Area, moved around a lot, ended up from South San Francisco to Brisbane, back to San Bruno, back to San Francisco, just kind of always on the go. We were in South City for a while, and that was kind of when I got to see most of the chaos between my parents, the drugs, the cops always being at the house. There's some funny stories from when I was a little boy. Cops came to the house one day. Mom was pregnant at the store, and they didn't have a warrant to go into the home, so they cuffed my father up. I was in the home, and he actually had a bag of dope in his back pocket, and they hadn't searched him yet. So he made up some excuse. Stove was on. I need to go in the house, turn it off. I'm going to hold you guys responsible if something happens to my son. Well, cop messes up and goes out the door first. And my father's coming out second, grabs the dope out of his back pocket and flings it across the living room. So, the cops end up actually, mom shows up. She's 8 months pregnant. They actually draw a gun on her, make her get down on her belly at gunpoint, whole blah, blah, blah. So they come back in the house. Cops couldn't get a warrant. They didn't arrest him, and he's looking for the bag of dope. And I'm 5 years old, and I figured it out, went and grabbed it and flushed it. So stuff like that. That was kind of like the childhood. And it was funny actually, just talking to my mom recently this week. A lot of my memories in that age range was a lot of different people taking me to do things. It wasn't my parents. It wasn't my dad. It was really just druggies hanging around that wanted to help take care of me to get drugs from my pops. So, like the movies and going to the toy store and all that stuff was just a bunch of dopers that were really just hanging around the house from time to time. So a lot of my childhood was that up until we moved to Modesto. And honestly, it was the best thing that could have happened. My mom leaving with my father. One, they weren't right together. So, they had their own journeys they had to take. And so, segueing into Modesto, we moved in with my great grandmother, me and my sister about 6 years apart. Mom was just trying her best, trying to figure it out, 21 years old with 2 kids and, no education. And then my stepdad eventually came in the picture, and we had a good little family thing going, but we were still kind of moving around a lot, still trying to figure out the financials. And my stepdad ended up taking us to Arizona for a couple of years, which was, thinking back, was probably the most calm and fun my life had ever been. From age 10 to 13 was just a good time for me. It was we lived in Phoenix, and it was kind of in a ghetto neighborhood. It wasn't too bad though, but I was just a little skateboarder, rollerblader kid, not really paying attention to anything other than that. And around age 12 though in Arizona is when I started to fit in more with the Hispanic crowd. I don't want to say cholo lifestyle, but it's different than California. So it was just, the Dickie suits and the button-up shirts, and that was kind of what I started to draw towards before I came back to California. And moving back, I was 13. Ended up back in Modesto, and the reason I call Modesto my home is that's just kind of where I got gamed up on the street life. That's where I really got all the knowledge and kind of thrown into the fire to really see that lifestyle. So I ended up moving in with my father, which he just got out of prison. I'm 13, he's 29 years old. Just a young man trying to figure it out himself. So he came home and ended up having to work in San Jose. So he was gone every day from 4 a.m. to 9 p.m. I didn't see my father. He had to work. He was just trying to get his money and keep his life on track, which opened up the door to me to just hit the streets. Nobody's around, nobody to fucking tell me what to do. And, I'm just kind of running around. And the neighborhood I grew up in was rough. Sonoma County's got some hoods and some ghettos, but I'll say Modesto's a lot different on how they function. And, the kids were vicious. I can remember being 13 years old in that neighborhood and, walking around with shanks, and, you come out of my apartment and there's 15 homies on the corner flamed up, slinging dope. And it was kind of like a real neighborhood. And we actually had to take a bus. Our whole neighborhood had to take a bus to our junior high, which was in Empire, California, which Modesto and Empire didn't get along. So as we left to school, it was just an actual neighborhood thing. So when you got to school, we all stuck together, and kind of vice versa. But that was really my first, indoctrination into gang life and street life and just kind of how it ran. There'd be shootings in my neighborhood all the time, kids getting killed, 13, 14-year-olds, not making it. And, it was an eye opener. It teaches you a lot as a young man. We all want to be tough, but there's fear. We all have fear. Nobody's the toughest guy on the block, and trial and tribulations will either make or break you. And if you start off that way as a young man, it just it can snowball if you let it. So as I went from junior high to high school, the street life definitely started to get more intense. My high school, and I went to Johansson for a little bit, which is on the east side of Modesto, and then I ended up going over to Ceres High, which is funny, is like right in front of my high school was a farming camp. So that was a whole different neighborhood in itself. They called it El Campo, and it was all Northerners. And we're talking 30-year-old men would come out to the front of the school every day to fight teenagers. So if I walked out that way, you had that issue. If you went to the right to go home that direction, you're going towards Vadio, which is a whole nother neighborhood. If you go the other direction, you're going towards Deep South Side. And it's just either direction you went as a young man to get home was always, are you going to make it home? I can count time and time again, getting chased down, shot at, jumped. It was a lot, and I didn't realize it until I left Modesto how bad and ghetto it really was. When you're immersed in it, you can't tell. That's just your day-to-day life. My dad wasn't really in the gang stuff anymore. He was just kind of working man. But my brother, used to rob banks and do stuff like that. So he had a whole little crew of things he was doing, and so just that home lifestyle was it was just different. The comparison from my mother's house to my father's house was 100% different. And I did a lot of back and forth in high school from Modesto to Chico because that's where my mom ended up. And of course, when your mindset is in that street life, you're going to find it no matter where you go. So even though Chico wasn't as bad, that was already where my head was at. So the minute I got there, you're going to find those kids, you're going to find that crowd. And, lucky for me, I can say that the couple years on and off in Chico, I got very lucky because I have a theory that when a city is not as grimy, people act out a lot more, right? You can get away with a lot of things. And that ended up being the Chico effect for me. It was all the kids I was running with, people weren't getting gunned down a lot. So, you're going to think you're tougher than you really are. You think that little group you're in is making noise. And it's until you go somewhere else and you get a game changer, a little awakening. And that came for me when I ended up back in Modesto in 2008. I just turned 18, and the street life in Modesto had really erupted that summer, and I kind of immersed myself in that as well. And lucky for me, I ended up meeting my son's mom, who was from Kashaya. I met her in Chico briefly, and we ended up starting a relationship together. And the last year I was in Modesto, I was just making some really piss poor decisions, just letting life get the better of me. Lucky I made it out here that summer, but not even a couple months after I made it here, my two closest friends I grew up with were murdered, and that helped me solidify my mindset that I needed to move forward in my life. That was a heavy blow for me. And if it hadn't happened, who knows where I'd be. It's tragedy that my friends are gone, but it definitely helped mold me into the man I am today, to just wake up, and realize that the streets aren't for everybody. I think we get stuck in this mindset of toughness, and that's not tough. The streets is just the streets. You have no choice. It's either kill or be killed, and it's just a survival instinct. That doesn't make you tough. I think my big message towards that is just, working hard, taking care of your family. That's real men. That's what real men do. You don't question, you just jump on it. And that's kind of how my life formed when I got here. Is my son's mother is the oldest of 11, and she came from a very broken home. And by the time I was 22, we had taken in 5 of her little sisters and her brother on and off for about 6 years. So as I'm a young man myself trying to raise my child and survive and figure life out, I'm taking on 6 kids that aren't mine. And I love kids. I've always, because of my growing up with my stepmom, or how I felt as a young man, just the neglect and not being loved. I always make sure kids feel love, no matter what. I don't ever want them to feel not wanted or not welcome. So when I took all those kids in, I took it on fully. I wanted to become their father, and I tried really hard. I really did. My biggest rule was go to school. That was it. And because of the upbringing they had, there was not much they could do. They fought that system with me, and then eventually they all ended up back on the streets, on and off. And sadly, I got to watch all those kids. Every year as they got older, just kind of let the streets eat them alive. The brother ended up in prison for 6 years, and we lost one of the sisters to drug overdose, and it was tragic to watch. But it didn't slow me down from that's always going to be my fight. I'm never going to stop trying to help. At the end of the day, if I have it in my power to help you, I'll help you. And I think I've had to learn over the years too that sometimes if you're hurting inside, or if you're not in the right state of mind, it's hard to help people. And I've had those moments, where I've helped when I actually didn't have to give, but I still did it. And my journey is just beginning. I'm only 34, and I got an 11-year-old son that I can't slow down for either. So yeah.
The next question I have for you is, who do you consider a hero or a legend that helped you become the man you are today?
So I think the hero that helped mold me is it's gonna be 3 men. I mean, it's gonna be my father, of course, my stepfather, and my grandfather. And I'll touch base on how each played a part in that role. Is my father growing up was not a good dad. I mean, he had no affection for me. He was head deep in drugs and selling drugs. And so, like, my early childhood, I don't have much memories of my father. But what I do have is a lot of memories of my grandfather. My grandfather really took that role on for me my whole life. He taught me a lot about work ethic and, just being a good man and taking care of your family. So all the baseball games and doing stuff on the summertime, that was with my grandfather, and he really helped me just kind of be who I am today, still be loving on the inside. And when my stepdad came into my life, tragically, as most young men, if he's not your father, you're not going to show him the love that he probably deserved. But looking back, and after all those years of raising, my ex-in-laws, and even being a stepdad at one point, that fight that you do for kids that aren't yours, when you actually love kids and you put that affection and that time into them, and you don't get it back, it's very hurtful. And I did that to my stepdad, and it took me to become an adult to realize that. And I had to reach out to him one day and just thank him for dealing with that side of me, not giving him the love and the respect he really deserved, because he was the one there, that really tried and kept the roof over our head. And so I thank my stepdad a lot as well for he always worked. He always got it done, no matter what. Even if he had to work 2 hours away, he'd go do that for us to make sure we had the life we needed, So, those 3 men played a pivotal part in my life. And yeah.
Thank you for that. So I have a few more questions for you, and then we'll wrap it up. The next question I have is, What are you doing active now in the Native community?
For the last 4 years, I've been just kind of on my own journey of if you need help, I'm there for you. Right now, I've been accepted to work with the Warriors Hike program with Ruben Crowfeather. He's coming back from Sundance, I believe, this month, and we'll be coordinating to see how I can help and assist with his program. He's working with the youth right now. Anytime I can help out the land, whether it's chopping wood or helping an elder with anything around their home, I've always made myself available to the community. I've done stuff in the previous years where we'll just kind of reach out to local young men that are connected through family. They're maybe going through something, and go and sit down and just have a chat with them. Talk to them, because the big thing for me, my big push is always going to be the youth. If I had somebody stronger in my life as a young man, then I might have ended up a lot different. And so I just make myself available at all times. Right now I have a young man in our dance group that I'm going to start teaching how to box. He just started high school, and so things like that. I just take on kind of a big brother role, and I'm open to anything and everything. So yeah, I just always make myself available. I don't ever ask for anything in return either. That's the way I feel like you should do things. Just put good out and good comes back.
Any words of wisdom to the next generation, to your future generation, to the next generation of Native people, Native youth? Any words of wisdom to them?
Biggest thing I can think of for all youth coming up that's Native is to learn the ways. I feel like the youth is getting so far removed from anything traditional, whether it's ceremony, roundhouse, sweat, even just being involved in the community. There's a big gap there right now. So for this next generation, I just feel like learn your language, learn who your people are, trace that back and really dig into your family bloodline. And I've done language class with Kashai, and I think one day I just asked a simple question to elders. I said, how many people are left that speak this language fluently? And the answer was 9. I think we came up with 9 total. So out of a whole tribe, there's 9 people left, and they're all in their 80s and 90s, and they'll be gone soon. And then if they're gone, who's going to be left to teach this language?
Final question I got for you. At the end of the day, when it's all said and done, when they say Anthony, what do you want people to remember you for?
I want them to remember me being a loving man. I think we steer away from that as men, to not show affection, not show love. And I'm very affectionate and loving with my son, and I always will be. And I think, when I'm laid to rest, I just want people to remember that I gave love.
Thank you for that, Anthony. I do appreciate you taking time out of your day. And I want to thank everyone who tuned in. Please like, please subscribe, leave a comment if you like. With that being said, everyone have a great day. Oh.